I thought a little bit about changing the title of this thing from Soul Care with Stevie Boy to Bunny Trails with Stevie Boy. I lots of bunny trails. Um it's one of those sorry not sorry things. There are just lots to talk about, and there's lots to think about in terms of framing up what is what does what we have thought about and read and studied, what does that do for how we live? Because that's the bottom line. it it's not about how much do you know. It's about how is that shaping my life, my choices, my behaviors. Paul wrote, let us live up to what we have already obtained. And that simply means, you know, whatever you know, live up to it. Okay, already I'm on a bunny trail. Okay, let's go back to the passage we're studying from Second John. In verse 5, the last sentence of that verse, I ask that we love one another. I mean, that's the drum beat. That's the heartbeat. That's John's. That is John's life mission in one sentence, to call us, to ask us to love one another. And then he goes on in verse 6. And this is love, colon. There are a couple of places in Scripture where you get, okay, this is a definition of love. One of the places that jumps to mind there is an entire chapter, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Line after line of what love is and does, and what love is not and does not do. It puts the flesh on the bones of, here's love. Love, Jesus himself said, this is love, that a man would lay down his life for another. And Paul writes, there's no greater love than that one would give his life for another. And well, now John writes, this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. We talked a little bit about already this idea of to walk. It has everything to do with my normal lifestyle. This is the normal activity, pacing, the normal commitments, the normal execution of my daily life. This to walk in obedience doesn't mean that we, if it was on a chart, there'd be spikes where we obeyed, and spikes and troughs where we didn't. It's not like that. It's like our normal activity. You chart our normal life with obedience to his commands. And you can't leave out the fact that John's not talking about, in my opinion, John's not talking about all the commands and laws of Judaism. The 360 some commands in the Old Testament, going back to Genesis chapter 20, where he gave the 10 words, and then essentially through Numbers, Deuteronomy, and even Leviticus, to line upon line, precept upon precept. I mean, there were lots of things. And then don't forget that by John's day, the teachers, the rabbis, had, I think, in an honest attempt to elucidate, to illuminate, and give enlightened thoughts and views to help people understand how do you execute on these laws. Over time, those opinions became as binding as the law, so that it was all essentially would have been for me an unmanageable number of commands, so that the rabbinical traditions carried the same basic weight as the commands, direct commands from God. But don't forget that John, go back. This is verse 4. It has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth. Walking in the truth. We're talking about the same thing here. Just as the Father commanded us. And now, dear lady, I'm not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. This command is the central command that John's talking about. This is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. How do you do that? By loving one another. Does it have to be any more difficult than that? Oh, let's stop and think. Could it be any more difficult than that? And the answer is probably not. Because loving one another is a difficult thing. On one level, to love somebody, that's just love them. What does that look like? How do I do that well? Recently had a conversation with a person about one of their kids that was really in a struggle. What do you do? They were really and truly, they had not made up a dilemma. They truly had a dilemma, because up to this point it hasn't seemed to matter how they have treated and what they have offered. It's all been, it just hits a wall. Bottom line is, what do you do about that? And the simple answer is here's the thing. What would Jesus do? Oh, that unfair question. And it's unfair for a couple of reasons. One is, Jesus knew everything. So whatever Jesus did about anything was the right thing. I don't have that advantage. Second thing is, if a guy could take 5 loaves and 2 fish and feed 5,000, if a guy could raise somebody from the dead, if he himself could come back from the dead, he can do anything he wants to do, right? I don't have that advantage. So it's a little bit of an unfair question. And yet, on the other hand, it's the right question. What would Jesus do? Well, he would love. Now, sorry, my computer is talking to me there. Broke my train of thought. Well, here's the thing. What would Jesus do? The answer to that is always, he would love. Didn't always look the same. But there were times when his love confronted. He sometimes confronted his disciples. And one of the things that jumps to my mind about that is when he would say, "Where's your faith?" Remember, they were in the boat on the Sea of Galilee. Huge storm arose. Jesus was sleeping in the bow of the boat. And the disciples woke him up and said, "Don't you care? We're going to drown. What's the wrong? Well, how can you not get, well, come on. Well, and Jesus said, he stood up and he said, "Peace, be still." And the Sea of Galilee became as calm, as smooth as glass. And he looked at him and he said, "Where's your faith?" Sometimes we'd say, the King James Version said, "Oh, ye of little faith." Yeah, okay, well, that's love. Love doesn't pretend everything is just fine. Sometimes love has to confront. But Jesus didn't punish them because of their lack of faith. He just confronted them about their lack of faith. Well, what about with the Pharisees? Boy, you talk about confrontation. There's hardly any place that Jesus was not in confrontation with the Pharisees whenever it comes up in the biographies. Did he hate them? No. Did they hate him? Yes. But what did Jesus do with them? He loved them, but he didn't lay down and let them, run the truck over him, because there were no trucks. But he didn't lay down and let the ox cart roll over him. He confronted. See, sometimes love confronts. Sometimes James Dobson's book, the title and even the contents are very, very appropriate, where he talks about tough love. Love is tough sometimes. And we don't, I think sometimes we don't know what to do about that. Okay, I get that. But see, if we're going to walk in his commands, then where we begin, the most important of all commands, Jesus said it, and then John reiterates it, is to love one another. The question, I think, all of us as believers have to wrestle with pretty continuously, if we're going to walk in his commands, is what does love in this moment look like? It's almost like I could change the what would Jesus do question to what would love do here? I'll share again with you what I think is the finest definition of love I've ever heard. It's not in the Bible. You're not going to find this in a chapter or verse. I don't have that reference for it, but I think it does encapsulate what all that is there when it says love is doing for the other person what they really need. Wow. Doing for the other person what they really need. So the question, what would love do, begs the second question. What do they really need? That's a hard question to answer. A lot easier question to answer is, what do they want? Usually that we can know, but sometimes, don't you have this experience? That person you're in relationship with is kind of hiding from you what they want. They're in this game, power game. As long as they can make you keep guessing what they want, they have power over you. It happens all the time. The second question is, what do I really want to do for them? So this is the parent question, isn't it? What do I want to do for them? Boy, is it ever the grandparent question. But there is a question that still hangs higher, more important. The question is, what do they really need? I do not have a formula for discovering that, because there is no formula for it. Here's what I've discovered for myself, though, about that question. I have to have the wisdom of God to know what they really need. And so, hey, James gives us great hope when he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously without finding fault, and it will be given to him. Ask. Lord, I don't know what they need. See, I begin virtually every counseling session with that prayer. I don't know what we need here, God. Give me the insight. I trust you, God, to show me, what do I need? What do they need? And then how do I move in that direction? Well, that's That's what I got for today. I hope we get to connect this way again next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.